Okay, let's dive right into this. Have you ever seen a decisive victory completely and utterly backfire? Well, welcome to today's Explainer, where we are going to unpack one of the most dramatic and frankly deeply ironic shifts in power in global history. We're looking at India in the late 17th and early 18th centuries, a period defined by this incredibly bitter struggle between the mighty Mughal Empire and the resilient Marathas. What starts as a seemingly brutal, absolute victory for the Mughals completely unravels, and it ends up transforming the hunted into the undisputed kingmakers of the subcontinent. It's an absolutely brilliant story of survival, administration, and turning the tables. To keep things organized as we navigate this 60-year saga, here's our game plan. We'll be looking at 1. Aurangzeb's fatal miscalculation, 2. The era of Tarabai, 3. The battle for the throne, 4. The rise of the Peshwas, and finally, 5. Masters of the Mughal throne. Let's get to it. Section 1. Aurangzeb's fatal miscalculation, where a brutal execution backfires. The year is 1689, and honestly, the mood is incredibly grim for the Maratha Empire. Things deteriorated so rapidly. In March 1689, the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb captures Sambhaji, the paramount sovereign of the Marathas, and the eldest son of the legendary Shivaji Maharaj. And Aurangzeb orders this horrific, brutal execution. We're talking pulling out nails, cutting the body apart, and parading the remains around to the beat of drums. It was meant to be a terrifying message. Right after that, Mughal forces capture the Maratha capital of Raigad, and they throw Sambhaji's wife and his young son, Shahuji, into prison. It looked like the absolute end of the road. But Sambhaji's half-brother, Rajaram, manages to slip away, and for the next 11 years, he just relentlessly moves from place to place, waging this fierce guerrilla war to keep the Maratha spirit alive, until he tragically passes away from illness in 1700. Now, here is the massive, almost unbelievable historical irony. Aurangzeb paraded the king's body around, truly believing he had completely crushed the Marathas for good. He was totally clueless that by removing that central figurehead, he actually sparked a wildfire of decentralized resistance. It's that classic mistake, right? You squeeze too hard and suddenly every single Maratha commander becomes a king in their own backyard, attacking Mughal outposts everywhere. So Aurangzeb's brutal victory was actually the very catalyst for his own empire's downfall. Which brings us to Section 2, the era of Tarabai, where the Queen Regent holds the line. By 1700, Rajaram is gone, creating a very dangerous leadership vacuum. So who steps up? Enter Rajaram's widow, Tarabai. And let me tell you, she did not hesitate for a second. She immediately crowns her 4-year-old son as the new king, but since he's literally a toddler, she steps in as Queen Regent. She effectively becomes the true leader of the Maratha defense from the shadows. She rallies the troops, she holds the line against the Mughals, and she basically ensures the entire empire doesn't just collapse during its most vulnerable window. Moving to Section 3, the battle for the throne. And this is where we get twin successions. We don't just have one empire in crisis, we suddenly have two. This era is just pure, unadulterated chaos. On one side, Aurangzeb dies and his sons are fighting for the Mughal throne at the Battle of Jajau. Muazzam ultimately wins that one. But before the battle even happened, his rival, Prince Azam, pulled a highly calculated move. He released the long-imprisoned Maratha heir Shahuji. Why? Well, specifically to stir the pot and sow discord back in the Deccan. And on the other side, it worked perfectly. Shahuji goes home and demands the throne. Tarabai says, "No way, my husband saved this empire, my son is the king." And boom, we have a Maratha civil conflict that culminates at the Battle of Khed. At the Battle of Khed, Shahuji actually pulls off the win. He defeats Tarabai, forcing her to retreat south to Kolhapur, which splits the Maratha kingdom in two. But here's the kicker. Shahu didn't do this purely on his own. He had the brilliant strategic backing of a mastermind from the Chitpavan Brahmin community, a guy named Balaji Vishwanath. This victory gets Shahuji the crown, sure, but it also plants the seeds for a massive shift in how the empire is run. We're talking a move away from purely warrior-led rule to some serious high-level administrative governance. That leads us perfectly into Section 4, the rise of the Peshwas, moving from the cabinet to kings. We're stepping off the battlefield now to look at the administrative structure that changed everything. So long before the British showed up with their systems of governance, Shivaji Maharaj had already established the Ashta Pradhan, an 8-minister cabinet. Think of it exactly like modern-day governments. They had specialized roles. You had a home minister, an education minister, the whole shebang.
It was a deeply structured way to run a sprawling empire, meaning the government didn't just fall apart if the king had a bad day. Now, at the very top of this 8-minister cabinet sat the Peshwa, basically the prime minister. Originally, this was just an administrative job. The Peshwa served at the pleasure of the king and could be fired at any time. But in 1713, Shahuji appoints that brilliant strategist we just talked about, Balaji Vishwanath, as his Peshwa. And Balaji is so incredibly vital to stabilizing the empire that the real power begins to shift. The king's role starts to diminish, and the power of the Peshwa just absolutely skyrockets. After Balaji dies, the role passes down to his son, making it completely hereditary. By 1750, under a new Peshwa, they formalized this crazy transition of power in 3 steps. Step 1, they signed the Treaty of Sangola. Step 2, under this treaty, the Chhatrapati legally agrees to become a mere figurehead, just residing as a symbol of the state in Satara. And Step 3, the Peshwa officially takes over all real executive and military authority, running the whole expanding empire from Pune. So the prime minister legally became the king in everything that name.
And finally, Section 5, Masters of the Mughal Throne. Talk about the ultimate irony. Let's look at how this all climaxes.
Check out these massive numbers, 15,000 horsemen and an annual tribute of 10 lakh rupees. Around 1718, the Mughal emperor's deputy in the Deccan, a guy named Hussein Ali, realizes he is in trouble and desperately needs Maratha help to survive his own internal politics. So he strikes a staggering deal with the Peshwa. The Mughals officially recognize Maratha authority over their territories and grant them massive tax collection rates. In exchange, the Marathas agree to supply 15,000 highly skilled horsemen and pay 1 million rupees in annual tribute. To put into perspective just how wild this is, historian Richard Temple famously called this pact the Magna Carta of the Marathas. It was absolutely monumental. Decades after Aurangzeb literally tried to wipe them off the map, the Mughal Empire was now officially, legally validating the Maratha Empire's right to exist and collect revenue. But then we get to the absolute jaw-dropper. The Mughal emperor, Farrukhsiyar, is secretly plotting against his own commander, Hussein Ali. Well, Hussein Ali figures it out, and he calls in his end of the bargain. In 1719, those 15,000 Maratha horsemen ride north. Just let that sink in for a second. The very people who were hunted by Aurangzeb 30 years prior casually march into the Mughal capital of Delhi, and they literally act as executioners, helping to depose, blind, and kill the Mughal emperor. The aftermath of this Delhi expedition is staggering. The emperor is dead. But on a much more personal, emotional level, Shahuji's mother, Yesubai, who had been rotting in Mughal captivity for decades since that terrible fall of Raigad in 1689, is finally freed and brought home. The tables haven't just turned, they've been flipped over completely. The Marathas are no longer hiding in the hills. They're sitting in Delhi, acting as the undisputed kingmakers of the Indian subcontinent. So we started with a brutal execution meant to crush an empire, and we end with that exact same empire dictating terms in the capital of their oppressors. It's a real mind-bender. But as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a fascinating question to chew on. While the Chhatrapati remained the deeply revered symbol of the people, when you look at the strategy, the diplomacy, and the march on Delhi, who were the true architects of the 18th century Maratha Empire? The kings who wore the crown, or the Peshwas who pulled the strings? Thanks for joining me on this incredible journey through history. Keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.